Adorable.
Hey, out there, let's do this, America. Hey, this is Dr. Mike Sevilla here, Dr. Mike Sevilla Live. Today is Thursday, August 21, 2014, and here at Family Medicine Rocks World headquarters, it is summertime. It is 77 degrees. It is hot. It is humid, but I am inside. Why? Because I am very looking forward to our conversation with my good friend Meredith Gould. Meredith, how are you doing this lovely day?
I'm inside and I'm having a great conversation with my dear friend Mike Sevilla, so life is good.
We have a number of topics that I have here officially, but we're going to scatter all around. I just want to tell people that right now. But what
That's the beauty of our conversation.
kind of the impetus for this is that we're going to talk about Stanford Medicine X coming up, and then we'll talk a little bit about healthcare, and then whatever tangents we get at the end of the show, we will do that. So just to let people know what we're going to be talking about. So yeah, let's start out with Stanford Medicine X there, Meredith. It's just I'm looking forward to seeing you again. It's been 3 years. I first met you at Mayo for their social media conference. I can't believe it's been 3 years ago. But I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Yeah, I guess some initial thoughts on Medicine X in general. We'll talk about kind of your story in a little bit, but just this meeting in general. Like, do you have any expectations going into this meeting at all?
Well, it's interesting. I had a laugh when you were interviewing Chris Snyder and you asked him how he got involved, and he said Nick Dawson. I'm thinking, oh, wow, Nick Dawson's like the mule for Medicine X, because Nick Dawson is the one who said to me, you should really apply to go to that. I talked to him a while ago because I wanted to get more involved, get back to being more involved with my healthcare communications and my patient advocacy and health literacy stuff. And had a great talk with Nick, and he said, well, you've never gone to Medicine X, you should go. And I said, well, okay, can't afford it. He said, apply for a patient scholarship. And I said, okay. And so that's what I did, and it was very interesting because, and I think I mentioned this to you, I know I've mentioned this to other people, I mean, usually I look through applications and I zip through them and I fill them out or I don't fill them out, but for whatever reason, the Medicine X application grabbed my attention, and it invited me into a deeper inquiry into what do I think and what do I believe and what do I want to contribute to a conference like this, especially as an e-patient, because a lot of people don't know me in that identity. So I come to it both as a healthcare communications person, as a sociologist, but as also someone who has had quite an exciting medical history that I haven't really talked about over the years. So so that got me motivated for that, and then also I've had some pretty interesting, I'm going to speak in code here, I've recently had some very interesting experiences with conferences based at academic institutions. And then of course the gold standard for me has been Mayo, because Mayo excels at hospitality and understanding the particular concerns of and physical needs of the people who attend conferences that are hosted by Mayo, the social media week. So I was curious to see what's Stanford going to be like, and I have to say, impeccable, absolutely impeccably organized conference. So very, very happy about that, and looking forward, because now I've experienced that through the emails and the Facebook groups and the engagement on Twitter. I'll be very curious to see and feel how that is in person. But there's been palpable warmth and invitation and hospitality, and also brain challenges, which I like, thinking ahead, going into the conference not as a passive attendee, but as someone who has been invited to engage in the topics in advance.
Just to let the audience know, the allergies here in northeastern Ohio are really challenging to me this week. So if you hear me mute myself and cough off camera, that's why. I'm fine. It is just the
You should see a
allergies
doctor.
here. I should see a doctor. That's what my hospital staff. I mean, yeah, my office staff.
Look in the mirror, for God's sake.
But people know you, Meredith Gould, as the church social media superstar, digital strategist. So when you go to MedX and people ask you about your e-patient story, what are you going to share with them?
Oh, I'm not going to share.
Oh, really?
No,
I guess it's not a requirement.
No, it's not. Well, it's interesting. I'm getting involved in a couple ways. One is I am going to be on a panel that's going to be on Sunday morning, and I was invited onto that panel by Pam Ressler, who organized it, and it's Pam Ressler, Colleen Young, who's a online community manager and has started the Hickson Canada chat, and Susanna Fox, who's now entrepreneur in residence with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So when Pam approached me, she wanted to propose a panel about illness in the digital age. And I was honored and thrilled that I was invited to do that, and my role on that is to speak as a sociologist about how digital has changed our cultural expectations and understandings about what does it mean to be ill, and what does self-disclosure look like, and is there such a thing as privacy and all that. So that, and the other thing we did with that, and people who are watching this are probably, and if they're aware of Medicine X and following all this, are probably aware of this. One of the things we've done for that panel, which was Susanna Fox's great idea, is to flip the panel. So we've done a series of blog posts. Each of us have blogged about the panel, asking readers to weigh in with their issues and concerns and what they want to talk about and their views about what does it mean to be online, and just when do they disclose and when do they not disclose, and what are the factors, and how does it help build community and all that sort of thing. So that's one thing I'm very excited about. The other thing that I imagine I will get involved with informally is a passion that I'm just starting to talk about and just on the verge of writing about, is that I was diagnosed with my current presenting illness. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia back in 1986 when it wasn't even called fibromyalgia, and it was real garbage pail category. It was kind of the neurasthenia and hysteria for 20th century women. And I had a very innovative and very smart and diagnostically creative healthcare practitioner who was also very much into complementary medicine, and did the points test and everything. I said, yeah, this is definitely what you have. And over the years, I've had rheumatologists affirm that, and so forth and so on. Anyway, point being that because I've lived with this for so long, I've gone through what I'm now viewing both as a patient, or someone with a health condition, and as a sociologist, and as a healthcare communications, and somebody who's been a professional caregiver. I've watching my own trajectory, my own development in terms of identity relative to my illness. And so what I'm hoping to talk with people about, and I do a little bit of this online, but I want to talk to people more about what happens when you're 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and more than 25 years into living with a chronic illness. It is not my primary identity. I don't even think about it. And in fact, one of the things I want to talk about is the role and the value of some level of denial in terms of managing chronic illness and pain.
That's so interesting that you say that, because a lot of people kind of in the e-patient community right now are identifying themselves obviously as a person, but their kind of online identity as well is through whatever their diagnosis is. And from what you're, I guess, postulating is that maybe it's okay or maybe it's healthy to deny that a little bit?
Well, I think it changes. What I'm saying is, my theory is that it changes over the life cycle of the illness and the duration of the illness. Dr. Snate, Melissa,
Yes.
left a very extensive, wonderful comment on my blog post about the panel I'm on, and then wrote her own blog post about, on her own, on her Living with Lupus blog, about how she does not primarily define herself as someone with lupus and how she comes to other people with that. And she and I have had, actually we've spoken on the phone, so we've had conversations about at what point does that shift for someone in their life cycle. And I will add, it's different. I think it's different for someone with chronic illness as opposed to acute and terminal illness. I mean, there are nuances there. I think ultimately, and this is one of the things we're addressing in the panel and in the conversations I think we'll have with people and are already having with people, is ultimately self-disclosure has to be your choice. Knowing that nothing is private. So there's kind of that, there's a tension and that paradox in an online world. Nothing is private. Very hard to keep things private. Difficult to keep things private. And so any kind of self-disclosure is going to just assume it's going to be public. Now, for me, again, go back in time. I was diagnosed in '86, and so my reasons for not talking about having fibromyalgia, fibrositis it was called then, was employment, employability, health insurance. I think one of the reasons, when I look back on it, I don't think I can't decide, and maybe it's a bogus question, I can't decide whether I did myself a great service or did myself a great disservice by just plowing through. When I look back at the work schedule I kept for the first 5 or 7 years after diagnosis, well, certainly the first 5 years after diagnosis, there was no wonder that I was not ambulatory for 2 years after that. So what a lot of people don't know, and I haven't shared, and I'm more willing to do that now because I'm not at risk in terms of employment, and I'm not at risk anymore in terms of insurance. So now I'm more willing to talk about the consequences of having. I was this vice president in an ad agency running a PR division. I had client responsibilities, and I was in the agency by 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't leave till 10:30 at night for 3 years. That was pretty much the schedule, in addition to traveling for clients. I did that even though I had already been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and so as a result, by the time I left the ad agency, I did spend at least a year, and I would say probably a year and a half, where I was not particularly ambulatory. Denial let me keep my job, but it also flattened me.
I mean, so. I've talked with a lot of people, basically offline, and we may even touch during our conversation all this back channel conversations that are happening even more now than before. But yeah, I have discussions with people offline about self-identifying and coming forward, and about not only medical diagnosis, but mental health and other types of diagnosis to potentially disclose, whether it is in the grocery store or online. But the fear of that getting out there, either into the local community or in the global community in the digital world, that's definitely, I agree. I mean, it is a struggle. And people really wrestle with that. A lot of the advocates now are really saying, plow forward and be proud of who you are and stand up and do this. But, there is that, obviously, silent people that you don't hear from, and saying, hey, there are intended and unintended consequences for self-disclosure of anything online.
Well, it's a sociologist's field day, you got to know, because I look, first of all, the formal word for it sociologically is stigma. So the stigmatization of someone who has anything that's outside the norm. Sociology, we used to use the word deviance, and people got all flipped out about that. The word deviance only meant statistical, deviating from the norm, but it was freighted with so much popular connotation that we stopped using the word deviance. But for many years, sociologists would talk about deviant identity and primary deviant identity. Like, when do you choose to identify yourself as a sick person? As a primary deviant identity, meaning you're deviating from a social norm. But it got very gummed up because of the language, and so that language changed. When I look at, and it's great that we're talking about this because I'm just sociology in real time. I'm thinking there's actually a bell curve in the sense that people who are very vociferous advocates of just be yourself and be out there are either very young or older. At my age, where I'm an aging baby boomer, although please say I don't look it, but I'm an aging.
Meredith, you don't look it.
I know. Thank you for that. Cue cards, But I'm at the age and stage in my life where I don't care. I'll talk about it because I'm not going to. The consequences are minimal. I'm coming to the end of my life cycle, so I'm saying that. I see that the people who are if you do an analysis of who is the most active, advocating the most vociferously about being proud of your illness and becoming your illness and talking about your illness and your disease and blah, 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 either very young or at the I could not possibly care less stage of life.
Yeah, I mean, this is so fascinating talking about this, and I'm not making this up. I mean, I took a lot of kind of psychology and sociology classes in college, and this is it's fun just to kind of for me talk about this again. But it's I have no idea where I was going with that.
The fun is social science. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, it's just those people in the middle. It's not the people, the younger people or older people or middle-aged people. It's just those people in the middle who are like, oh, I want to just be out there and be myself and talk about this and maybe connect with other people with the same condition. But then, what if it gets out there, and it will get out there, and that's I guess the dilemma that they're in these days.
Yeah, I think the significant variable would then be duration of diagnosis or longevity of living with diagnosis as opposed to chronological age or even sex or gender or social class. I think, and I would say ethnicity also, racial ethnic status has a huge impact on self-disclosure. But I think those racial ethnic identity and length of time with the diagnosis are more significant factors than age, social class, or sex. That's just my sociological guess. Somebody will have to go do real research,
And I hope somebody does. I mean, because this is, I mean, a topic that I think needs talked more about. Well, let's shift a little bit here, and I did touch on a little bit about the back channel. I know we've talked offline about this back channel and this non-public conversation, and not only on this topic, but talking about church and talking about social media. Share a little bit with the audience as far as what your feelings are about that, and kind of the progression of public versus private conversations out there in the digital world.
Well, it's fascinating. I have a very, as rich and vibrant as my public social media life is, I mean, my back channel life is even more so. And the perfect example is that intersection of health and faith. So in the beginning, you introduced me as someone who's really well known for the church social media. And that's true. There's an entire group of people who only knows me as that, and there are also an entire group of people on Twitter who met me and only know me as a healthcare person. And what's happened over time for me is to watch those worlds come together. So, and I think we may have talked about this the last time we chatted, what's been really interesting is as I started to do more in church communications, and by the way, there are amazing parallels in the industries, and they are industries, okay? So all the issues that we deal with in healthcare communications, privacy, portability even, authority, hierarchy, are the same issues that show up in church communications. And so at one point I wanted to do a chart where I'd say, you know, hospital CEO, bishop, doctor, minister, deacon, nurse, patient, congregant, you know, just the same, and the same relationships and the same issues show up. So when I started to work more, to do more work in church communications, which was always, I always had both identities and careers going at the same time. It's just one's more ascendant than the other at different points. What I became interested in the back channel were how many people in the healthcare industry who were then contacting me to talk about issues of faith and their interest in church, or their disappointment with church, or their beliefs and feelings about the body, mind, spirit connections. And that was a fascinating thing, because I would have these conversations that when something like that, like this was a typical one, someone would send me a direct message saying, how do you get away with talking about your faith? You know, from a healthcare person. And I'd write back and I'd say, well, I guess I get away with it because I'm an independent consultant. And I also, I'm not answerable to an institution that might have issues about that, but also I decided, I think when I was probably in my late 40s, early 50s, that the project during that part of my age and moving into where I am now was integrated identity. That instead of having these, what I call these shards of self scattered all over the place, that it was time to pull them together. And that, so I would have an integrated identity online, and the way that shows up then is people in the healthcare community seeing me tweeting about church, and people in the church communities, and I work across denominations, I work ecumenically, so across denominations, see me tweeting about healthcare and healthcare communications and e-patient stuff. Now, what's interesting, again, the back channel, is just as people from healthcare have contacted me to talk about faith, I've had a lot of people in the church world contact me to talk about healthcare.
Yes.
And to talk about managing health crises, managing end-of-life issues. With HIPAA, one thing especially that really was very difficult for people in church is that with HIPAA, which most people always think the P stands for privacy, it does not.
Yes.
But what happened with HIPAA was that routinely it would be the hospital, you would know when a congregant or a parishioner was in the hospital and you could make a pastoral call. Now you don't know that unless a family member tells you, and even then you sometimes can't get in. The chaplains can, but the faith leader of a particular, of that congregant's community can't just get in. And so a lot of questions have come my way about then how do we minister to people who are in the process of an acute health crisis and minister to them afterwards? How do we provide pastoral care? Given the way the healthcare industry is structured. And it all loops back to social media.
Yes.
You know, you have tools, online tools, that allow you to be with your congregants or patients, you know, be smart, follow the rules, be ethical, but you are allowed to be that and do that. So social media, online, and it's broader than social media, but I'm most interested in social media. Those online social networking platforms have made the private more public and the public more private, because the back channel allows for privacy. When people complain to me, when I do trainings and people start complaining about privacy, I know what I'm looking at is someone who just actually doesn't have the technical skill to lock down their accounts. So I kind of set aside, I said, let's take a look at your privacy settings first, and then we'll have the conversation about what do you even mean by privacy.
Yeah, because a lot of these companies, I mean, everything is public by default, and when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that," because nobody told you, and the companies don't want to tell you that, and it can be very difficult to close things down. I remember when I started a Facebook account for my parents, so they can keep track of their friends and even people from their home country, the Philippines, how difficult it was to lock that down. How many different screens, how many different clicks, and yeah, it is not easy to make things really private, and just people just don't know that. And
it can be done.
It can be done, yeah.
But it begs the question. This is what we're, I wish we had more time with this panel at MedX, but it begs the question that we're addressing: is that what is public, what is private? How is that even? What does that even mean at this point in time? I hope I remember to say this in 2 weeks, but one of the things I find fascinating is that the whole notion of disclosure and self-disclosure has changed radically, and I mean in the true meaning of the word radical, at its root, has changed radically. So you can find people who share information that is other age cohorts are completely appalled by. Generation Z, millennials, 2 different generations, okay, they will think nothing of self-disclosing, and I might add using language that causes a near breakdown for aging baby boomers and World War II generation people. Like, how can those kids, why? They're going to be sorry they shared that. And my response is, actually, no, they're not. They're not sorry now, and they're not going to be sorry in the future because that has changed. The definition of self-disclosure has changed.
Oh, all kinds of definitions. Friend. What is that now versus back when we were kids, and just to let people know, just to share a little bit about me, and when I started out in social media, I was, as an anonymous blogger, and I know exactly what you're saying as far as what does disclosure mean, and I went through those struggles personally in my online life as far as what did I choose to disclose and when did I choose to disclose that, and I learned that you at some point cannot be private, cannot be anonymous at all, so I embraced that, and then kind of came totally out and not be anonymous anymore. So that is, I totally get what you're saying as far as this progression of disclosure over the past few years.
Well, and also there's this phenomenon known as doxing, D-O-X. Do you know that, doxing?
I don't know that.
Oh my God, I know something you don't know. Wow. So there's this phenomenon known as doxing, Google it, which involves outing people online, taking people who are anonymous online and finding and destroying them online, finding out who they really are, broadcasting to the world, oh, that anonymous account is really run by so-and-so, and that the term for it is doxing. Now, what's interesting, just as kind of an interesting aside, because I have no shortage of interesting asides, there are a bunch of anonymous parody accounts, anonymous parody accounts, especially in the world of church, that are absolutely hysterically funny. And I actually know who the people are because they've disclosed themselves to me over the years. And in one instance, and what's happened is I kind of blank on that because I prefer, I mean, I know who they are, but I don't need to know who they are. It's more funny for me if I don't know who they are. So in one instance, I follow this person on this person's personal open account, and I follow this person on the parody account. And by some, I'm sure there's a psychiatric term for it, I split them.
Right.
I rarely merge their identity for my
Right.
own amusement,
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I guess taking that to the next step is like, I have my, online identities now that I have my, real name and all that type of stuff. And there are sometimes people say, oh, you're not how you appear or you present yourself online, or other people are like, oh, you're exactly how you present yourself online, and people kind of split me that way, and that's kind of a weird type of thing.
Yeah, well, that goes to the introvert-extrovert thing. I have people, because I'm also an author, I have people, and for me, I have to say it's all coming together, which I'm very happy about, because now I have people who have read my stuff, and they come up to me and they go, oh, and then hear me speak, they say, oh, you sound exactly the way you write.
Exactly.
Or people who have met me and then read one of my books say, it's like listening to you speak. I go, well, I hope that's a good thing. And then the same thing in terms of the tweeting, because I have a very informal language system anyway.
Yeah, you do. I needed a translator.
Yeah.
Your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't use a lot of jargon. If I do, I'm always making fun of it. I use a lot of colloquialisms, and yes, I trash talk at times, but
well, let's. We talked about this before we went live here. Is this whole introvert extrovert thing, and when people see me at MedX, that you're gonna find. I'm gonna disclose right now, people out there. I'm talking to you. That I'm an introverted person. So when you meet me, I'll probably be over the top and this and that, and then there's gonna be a point where I'll be like, I'll see you guys later. I just need to just kind of, back up a little bit and just be, just hang out. And I'm not being mean to you people. I'm not trying to be better than you people. Sometimes I just get tired, and it takes a lot of energy, Meredith, just to kind of, for me to be around other people.
Yeah, me too. And a lot of people can't believe on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTJ.
Oh, I think I am too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of my pastor buddies said, "Oh yeah, and that J is like huge, real judgy." So INTJ, and on the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 1. So if you know about Enneagram, those are also the downside of the ones is that we have righteous indignation about almost everything. So in my writing, and my speaking, and my tweeting, and my posting, I think I come across as a lot more extroverted than I really am. As a sociologist, I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by people in groups. And that's what sociologists do. I say to people, I have an advanced degree in minding other people's business, putting people in categories, and judging them. I mean, I have a doctorate in that. So that looks like extrovert activity, but if you think about it really carefully, it appeals to introverts because I'm an observer. I'm a participant observer a lot of times, but I'm really an observer. And the observer place is watching. And even though I talk a lot, obviously, I also watch a lot, and I observe a lot. And to be able to integrate that information, I need quiet and I need solitude. So I can haul it out when I'm in public, and people think, "Oh, well, she's really extrovert and everything." But what people don't see, and I think this is true for those of us who are introverts, they don't see us going back into the hotel room and not even making it to the bed, flopping it onto the floor, saying, right, "Please, can I just get into a sensory deprivation tank at this point? That would be good."
Mm-hmm. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And people, it's easy, and I think this is true for shy people too, to get labeled as rude or aloof or mean. And so I invite people, not necessarily, well, relative to me, but relative to anyone, to think about being more generous around that and reframe that. And if somebody seems rude or aloof or mean, just take a moment to back it up and ask, am I looking at someone who's shy? Am I looking at someone who's an introvert? Am I looking at someone who's scared?
Mm-hmm.
Am I looking at someone who's overwhelmed? I mean, for some people, and doctors see, it should be, you'd think it'd be easy for doctors. I mean, doctors and those of us doing pastoral work also, we see that for a lot of people who are scared or overwhelmed, their default looks like rude.
Exactly.
Or their default looks like, or if they're afraid, their default looks like angry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I almost see it as a spiritual practice, as a spiritual discipline, to consciously ask myself, what's going on behind that? What is the deeper issue there?
That's what's fascinating to me. Trying to, and and I get curious too, like you, and when you interact with people or interface with people, you want to, well, at least I want to, pry a little bit and say what's underneath all of that there, and the timing of that is, don't want to look like I'm looking like I'm being a little creepy, but I guess that's my inner sociologist there, and being curious about people.
Well, it's that fascination with human behavior and the way it manifests in groups, because what people do in groups is different than what they do in small groups versus large groups, and then at the institutional level of bureaucracy and social institutions, kind of fascinating to look at that. It goes back to one of the issues that I'm always up against when I do workshops about social media and training with social media, when people say, and it doesn't matter whether it's the healthcare environment or the church environment, people say, well, we don't want to have a Facebook page because people will say mean things. People will leave mean comments. And my response to that is, oh, really? Tell me, you've never been in a meeting where people were saying mean things? I mean, people say mean things all the time. Now, in the context of church, I ask people to say, okay, what you have there is an opportunity for care, because if you have any kind of training, or even if you don't, but we know that people who are acting out are doing so because it's covering up a deeper hurt, okay? So you don't necessarily do it in public, which again gets back to your issue about the value of the back channel. When you see somebody doing something mean or inappropriate or rude or hostile online, that's the time to go to the back channel, or even, shock of all shock, pick up the phone and say, I know, what? And say, are you okay? What's going on for you?
Yeah.
Now, I've been on Twitter for so long. I've been on since 2008, and I've been on Twitter for so long, and with some people who have been on Twitter that long with me, that I've had people who can tell, and I can tell from their typing and their word choices if they're having a bad day. And I've had people call me or send me a note saying, "You okay? Your tweets are a little edgy today."
Or even lack of tweets. I've had people reach out and say, "Oh, we haven't heard from you in like 5 minutes. Are you okay?" Or if it's like most of the day, people. There's a regularity in person and also online too of hearing from people, and if they don't hear
That's
that
right.
or see that, then it's the same thing.
Well, and that goes to, we talk about stigma, mental illness, and especially suicide. Years and years ago, I watched an entire faith community come together when someone who was very visible in the Twitterverse disappeared, and APB didn't go, the old point bulletin didn't go out for a while. And after people started asking words, and the person committed suicide. And I actually got a phone call from someone who I met online. And when I saw the phone number come up, I said, "So this is about so and so. He's dead, right?"
Wow.
And the person said yes. Now, what I saw then, this is going back like 4 or 5 years, what I saw then was the first instance that I was aware of public memorial, grieving, and celebration. There was an online, they set up a hashtag and had an online memorial Twitter tweet service for this person. And that for me was a turning point for me in understanding online community. Now since then, I've been more involved with, well, a little lax lately, but the HPM, Hospice and Palliative Medicine community. I do lurk
Yes.
on the suicide prevention chat. I do lurk on a whole bunch of other chats where people, and I have a lot of conversations with people who are interested in getting the stigma of mental illness reduced. And so I've seen a change over the past chunk of time that I've been on Twitter and also on Facebook, where the media, the tool is no longer a passive way to report illness and distress, but is becoming an active tool for intervention. I actually watched an intervention happen with someone who was in the process of taking every single pill owned and was about sitting there with a gun as well. And I watched an intervention happen, and it happened on Twitter and on Facebook. And I was alerted to it on Twitter by someone said, go over to Facebook and watch what's happening. And so I watched an intervention. And so for people who say it's not real, I say, then you haven't seen somebody's life saved because of an intervention. And to have that person come out of the hospital with the proper meds, with the proper treatment, and say, you people saved my life. I mean, that's powerful.
Over the past year, I've gotten to know the quickly growing suicide prevention social media (SPSM) community, and like a lot of communities, very passionate people, and just asking for direction on how to communicate what their message. And I was on a Google Hangout with them about a week ago talking about Robin Williams, and that was very powerful for me, as not only as a primary care physician, but just as an observer, listening to them talk about how they can do better. And they talk about some of these online tools that they have, and it's fascinating for me also as a clinician, reading some of the research on not only medical diagnosis, like people can kind of pinpoint where like a influenza or meningitis outbreak is by analyzing the tweets, and also mental illness. They can analyze the tweets and Facebooks, and that's what we're going to see, and that's fascinating, and that's great for me to kind of see how they're going to integrate that better into, like you say, a real-time situation with people.
Well, and I wrote a blog post on my personal blog, More Meredith Gould. I wrote a blog post about 12-step intervention and using social media for that, and talked about in that post about how if you understand what alcoholism and addiction look like and how it manifests, and especially if you are in recovery yourself, I've watched people literally circling the drain, and I'm involved, again, God bless the back channel, I'm involved with a lot of people in 12-step recovery. We all know one another, we know who we are, and we rely on each other for support, and we also talk to one another when we see someone who is still determined to do field research with alcohol and drugs, acting out online, drunk tweeting, drunk posting, this, that, and the other thing, and then asking, what is our responsibility as as humans, as people of faith, as people who care about health, what is our responsibility? And at the same time, knowing that you can't make someone stop drinking, you can't make someone stop using, but what can you do to give that person hope and some kind of vision for the future? So that's interesting. I just, looping back to suicide, here comes some possibly TMI self-disclosure. Feel free to edit it out if you want. My mother, which again, I haven't written about this, and I'm on the verge of writing about this, and you heard it here first with Dr. Mike Sevilla. My mother's hobby was suicide attempts. So I grew up with a mother who did that. She was not successful. What she was successful at doing was wreaking havoc. And brilliant, talented, creative, funny, beautiful woman who I would say who was Betty Draper in a lot of ways. I tell people, watch Mad Men. Betty Draper, my mother. And her first suicide attempt that I was aware of and was present to was when I was probably 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. The last significant one that I was aware of was, I tell people, my 30th birthday present, which on the eve of my 30th birthday, I got a call from one of her friends saying, if you want to see your mother alive, you need to get to the ICU. And she lived. So I mention that because growing up with that, that's another view of suicide and what that looks like, or suicide attempts and all that. You mentioned the importance of primary care physicians, or any physician, knowing about this. Story, again, feel free to edit it out, but my mother, who I'm now pretty sure had Munchausen's as well, because she was always having stuff removed when she wasn't getting enough attention, asked me to go with her to meet with a surgeon for what I call the faux lung cancer event, and lied to him, absolutely lied to him about the medication he was taking. He asked her if there was any history of psychiatric illness, and she lied to him. At this point, I was already, I think, in my 50s, and had had tons of therapy myself, and had had enough of collusion, and took her aside and said, what was that? What was that no psychiatric history?
Wow.
You know, when we go back into the exam room, and this woman wants me in the exam room with her, my other hobby, I cannot, if I had a buck for every exam room I've been in with people, non-family members and family members, I'd be wealthy. Because I'm such a competent, loving presence. I think that's why. But anyway, so we're in the exam room, and my mother's sitting there, and doctor's like got the stethoscope on her back, and she says, my daughter wants you to know that I do have a history of suicide attempts. I do have I had a suicide attempt one. He's very professional. He says, what did you just pills? And then he says, any suicidal ideation? Now, well, at this point, the room is thick. The energy's really thick.
Yeah.
So I do what I do as a health advocate, as a caregiver, and then as a daughter growing up with a mother who was actively suicidal. I decide time to lighten it up. And I say, no, probably just homicidal ideation right now. You know, she laughs, he laughs, we move on. But I then have the sidebar with the doctor and say, look, if I'm wrapped real tight, it's because you need to know this woman lies about this stuff. You need to know that if she alleges that she's in pain, she'll be stockpiling something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's wild stuff, but as a result, I have very strong feelings and opinions, shock, and beliefs actually about end of life, about the right to die, about dying with dignity. I've also worked hospice. I've been with people who are dying, actively dying. of all the stuff I've ever done in my life, I think that is the most meaningful and the most holy time I've ever had in healthcare environments. But again, it's not something I've written about or talked about until now.
Well, I mean, thank you for sharing that. Definitely have to bring you back because I want to further explore that. In the past couple of weeks, I know I'm probably breaking some patient privacy laws, but I've had a couple of referrals of long-time patients to hospice care, and I tell the agencies that yes, definitely, I want to be a part of the treatment team and not have their hospice director kind of take over and do things, because I feel strongly about that, and we could probably get into that at a different time. But yeah, hospice care and another intersection of healthcare and faith, which I look forward to talking to you with. But just hospice care is just a whole different thing.
Well, I've been present to some phenomenal deaths and dying processes, and one that is like deep in my heart and in my mind and in my soul is a friend of mine, actually, a guy I went to graduate school with, and he died of cryptosporidium, which is an AIDS-related complication. And it is stunning to see what the human body can do. And he was seriously atheist, and there comes a point when people are dying, and I think in most health, especially acute and terminal illness situations, where everybody wants to be on the care team goes home because it's not fun and it's not nice and it smells bad and it's scary, and the robust care team is like down to like no people. And I had said to him in the beginning parts, as he was starting to get symptomatic, I said, save me for when you need me. Save me for, and I did get the call from his twin sister and said, it's time for you to come. And one of the things he said to me, which was amazing, he said, tell me about God. Tell me what you believe. Tell me about that. And this was a man who was not interested at all. And I was very, my response was, I don't even think I have the words for it. But you tell me how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Tell me what this is like for you. Now, we were very close, and I could do that. But that was an extraordinary experience. Now, he had the Gay Men's Health Collective at the time. This is in the early 90s, late 80s. They had these stickers, hilarious. They had these black and white stickers, black background, and superimposed in white was an image of the Grim Reaper. And the text said, "I'm dying for you to have this." And so my friend kind of wrote in the bequest name, and he slapped these "I'm dying for you to have this" stickers on his possessions, so that after he died, it was like, oh yeah, well, this lamp's for you. And it came with that sticker. So wild times.
Before I let you go, because a couple other topics that I wanted to cover. One is being an author and writing a book. Your latest book is The Social Media Gospel. People can go to meredithgould.com to get more information about that. And you're probably working on another project or another book. Are you able to share a little bit about that with the audience here?
Yeah, I always vow never again, and then I do it. I'm doing another book with Liturgical Press. I'm very happy about that. They were wonderful for me and with me and to me on the last book. And the new book is going to be about spiritual practices for the 21st century. I wanted to write a book. My pitch to them was the world does not need yet another book about how to meditate and pray. I think we have enough of those books. What I wanted to write, specifically for people who self-identify, disclose, as spiritual seekers, but who have basically gotten frustrated with or given up with the classical spiritual practices. And so I wanted to write a book about why and when do the traditional practices stop working? You know, which is something people of faith don't really talk about. Again, it's a great back channel conversation. I've had back channel conversations with priests who say, God, I hate praying the daily office. I mean, like,
you should write a book called The Back Channel Social Media Conversations. And
that's right. Yeah, and really got to work in this town again. But yeah, so I want to write about why and when the traditional practices don't work. And I also want to write about how to choose and embrace ones that will. So in this book, and this has been true for probably the last 3 or 4 books I've written, because I keep having to write this over and over again, the importance of knowing learning style, the importance of understanding whether you're a visual, kinesthetic, auditory, or kinesthetic learner, and how those things are blended. So sometimes when people talk to me about there's a spiritual practice they don't like, or they don't understand, or they can't do it, or whatever, when I ask them, well, tell me more about how you learn and how you take in information and how you convey information, what I usually discover is that there's some kind of massive disconnect between their learning style and the spiritual practice they think they're supposed to be doing. So, for example, someone who is a highly kinesthetic learner will love walking a labyrinth. That person will despise sitting meditation. Will get nothing out of it.
True.
People who love sitting meditation are usually auditory learners and hate the labyrinth.
Yeah.
Hate. Such a strong word. But really, I've had people say, I hate labyrinth walking. Whereas if you talk to a kinesthetic learner, they get as much meditative value and prayerful benefit walking a labyrinth as somebody does sitting in meditation, goes to learning style. So that's, again, I'll write it a little differently because of the context, but it's a little bit of a retread because I'm discovering, and in fact with the social media gospel, people said to me, the section on learning style and personality type were the most revelatory for them, that they hadn't thought before about the impact of personality type and learning style on the way they were using social media. I believe that that's also true for how we choose and how we respond to spiritual practices. So I'm going to be writing about that. And then I also want to talk about how if we think about spiritual practices as a way of being in the world to inform our doing, then we open up our understanding about what it means to even have a spiritual practice. So if you say, okay, reading, Lectio Divina, prayer, meditation, icon gazing, and painting, those are spiritual practices. Okay, that's fine. But what happens if, and this is what I hope to, if I ever get around to writing this, what I hope to say to people is, okay, now what if you articulate or reframe your spiritual practice as curiosity, as delight, as generosity? Then what becomes available to you in terms of the world seen and unseen, what becomes available to you? If you come at a spiritual practice that way, to say, today I'm practicing delight, what does that look like? So that's what I'm doing.
Great.
Or not doing, as the case may be.
And the last thing I wanted to mention, and man, you're a busy person. I did want to mention the Mayo Clinic social media week. It is October 20th to 23rd, 2014 in Rochester. You're very much involved with that. I'm very excited that they've given you opportunities to be more involved with that conference and also with the network. I just want to say congratulations, because I'm glad that you're going to be doing more with them and kind of giving them a big recharge into what they're doing.
Well, I have great colleagues, and I'm not just saying that because they might watch this. I really do. I'm on a team. I mean, have you ever heard of anyone who loves going to a staff meeting on a Monday morning? I do. I look forward to it. I attend through Google Hangout with other colleagues who are on other Mayo campuses, and it's just delightful. I'm happy about it. It again goes to the whole thing about integrated identity. It pulls together a lot of things I'm passionate about, a lot of things I've been trained to do. And so I am excited about that. I'm having fun doing it. The other thing I want to think about doing, I've been thinking about this, and I just haven't figured out how to do this yet, but it's going to be some kind of Venn diagram over time to show, Venn diagrams.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Some kind of, yeah.
The three circles, though, are body, mind, spirit. And I want to like visually depict how that's changed for me over time. So like the graduate school years, and I think this is true for other professionals in graduate education or professional education, body, mind, and spirit, they don't even come close to each other.
Right. Mm-hmm.
At this point in my life, my felt experience, can you tell I'm a visual kinesthetic learner, but my felt experience is that body, mind, and spirit are coming together in ways they haven't in a very long time. And the Mayo engagement, my work with Mayo, has really almost dropped the body part back in.
Oh.
Actively, well, because I'm just thinking about it more, and I'm more actively aware of it, and I'm more involved with people who we're talking about health and wellness. I mean, it's not all it's not all sickness and death. It's also health and wellness. So
yeah, exactly.
That's the other thing I'm thinking about, and I'm excited. I'm happy.
I'm excited to see you coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We've just been kind of,
together.
kind of ships in the social media sea out there, and seeing what you're doing, and you're seeing what I'm doing, and it'll be great just to kind of sit down with you and just chat and laugh a lot and have fun and have conversations. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, and if I don't talk to you, I'm not being rude. I'm just having an introvert moment.
Exactly. And I will totally get that and understand. I'll be like, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Well, Meredith Gould, thank you so much for the conversation. Definitely have to bring it back because I know I have a good time just kind of diving into things.
I had a great time with you. This is fabulous.
And we can pretty much talk about anything. And just to let the audience know, like I had like no script. We just go for it, and we just kind of bring up and see where our conversation lands us. But thank you so much for coming on. It's going to be a great time seeing you in person. So thank you.
See you soon. Thank you.
So thanks a lot, everybody. So DrMikeSevilla.com. That gets you all the stuff here, and I'll be interviewing more people coming up in the family medicine community and also for MedX as well. So check me out there. Follow me on Twitter. Have a good day, everybody. Bye, everybody.